Hey, what's up guys, it's Oakley, and this is going to be Sub-Commanders Carthage versus Rome. So if you don't know, basically what Sub-Commanders is you take Arena, and you combine it with the traditional massive battles of Total War. So the way this works is there's two different armies, but each army is split up into various sub-commanders, which then command the smaller elements of that force. The way we broke this down for this battle is a bit historical. So for instance, myself here, I'm going to be the African corps of the Carthaginian force. So a lot of the hoplites, the sacred band, Libyan infantry, some of the pikemen, Libyan hoplites. So that is going to be the core of the African units. However, of course, as Carthage was famous for, the mercenaries. This is going to be a contingent completely comprised of mercenaries, both melee units but also skirmishers, and this is going to be RAC Vindico. And then the third army that's going to be rounding this off is going to be in close support, and the third army is going to be led by Fisher. Here are the cavalry and elephants, so 2 African war elephants, and then 1 general, and I believe that's 7 of the Carthaginian cavalry right there to round off our force. So you can see how each of these definitely, can't stand on its own, and it really takes coordination to have a well-rounded force. That is the whole point of sub-commanders, makes the battles much more interesting. On the Roman side, we didn't split it up quite the same way as the Carthaginian force. Instead, we did it kind of by legion. So here, Indy Pride commands a traditional Roman legion with the triplex Achaeus, 3 lines with the Veltes. Now, DJP Soldier is going to be given an allied legion, which has not quite the same composition. He has a lot of Pericopes, some Triarii, and some Saki in the mix, so they're representing the allied legions that would have supplemented the Roman legions. And then finally, Papa Smurf here is supposed to be the cavalry and skirmishers. A bit more specifically, he is fielding a lot of the auxiliary forces, which actually would have had their own commanders. So you can see a mix of auxiliary cavalry. You see the Numidian cavalry, the auxiliary Syrian archers, and the Balearic. So overall, I think it's a cool and different way, a bit asymmetric in the way we cut up these different units. But that's how it was historically, and it'll be very interesting to see how this exactly plays out. The armies facing off against each other here on a big flat plain, ideal for combat. And they're just going to be slowly moving forward. And you can see from each army's vantage point, it is just rank upon rank of men, and they can't really make out what's going on in the distance. What I like about this sub-commanders, especially from this point of view, you get to see kind of from the eye level view of the commanders at the time exactly, how confusing the battlefield was. All you see battlefield was, because of the limited visibility range. We never have a top-down view for commanders. You always kind of see from the ground across, and it's always going to be these lines of troops. Now, even though I just stated that, let's go ahead and pop on our God's Eye in the Sky just to understand this contingent. So we did break this down with our mercenary warriors actually going to be taking up the wings. This would have actually been relatively commonly used tactic. The Africans in the center here, sprinkled with some hoplites and heavy infantry up through the center. African elephants in the rear, so that is something that usually the Carthaginians would actually put the elephants in the front ranks. Here we've held them back in reserve, which was used at times. And again, you can see the mercenary wing on the right, with the central corps here going to be pushing up to see if we can engage with the Romans. On our wings on either side, we have the cavalry kind of just holding firm. We're not going to be too aggressive here. The Carthaginian cav in Rome too is not very representative of the skill of the Carthaginians. They would have brought more strength had they had some Numidians, but in this case we don't quite have it. Anyways, I'm just giving you some quick pans of our forces here in some long, thin lines, starting to move up. A nice combination of here javelin men with the mercenary Gallic warriors and then some of these Scutari. So a pretty interesting force fielded from all around the Mediterranean. The Balearics also are going to be very important, moving up in our front ranks, and they're going to start to exchange fire with the enemies from a distance. And the Balearics were very notorious for their skill, highly prized mercenaries that the Romans and Carthaginians would have, drawn from. Same thing with the Rhodian slingers and Rhodian archers and things like that. Now I'm just going to show you a little bit more of the heavy infantry. I can't get enough of that from the Carthaginian side, the Punic side, just here lined up. I really love the Sacred Band. The Romans are slowly marching forward in their methodical approach that is, just iconic of the Roman legions. They're spreading out in a huge, massive wing. They have kind of somewhat preserved. The triplex Achaeus, however, it is much more compact than you would otherwise see, and there is this odd kind of unit thrown in here, the first cohort, that is a bit anachronistic at this point. So it was kind of weird to see these guys in the mix of you know, some of the manipular type legion or the plebeian legions, but in any case, the two armies are going to start to move up. You can see the Romans definitely making use of reserves. Same thing with the Carthaginians, but the Romans are going to be mostly the aggressors. From a Carthaginian perspective, we do better with the skirmishers, the Balearics, so we're going to let the Romans come to us, trying to get additional fire on against them. However, the Romans are just a steam engine, pushing forward. And once they're in range, the Syrian archers are going to be very good. The heavily armored, you know, vests and helmets that they have, they're going to be able to kind of absorb some of our early fire and start to exchange with some of their precise volleys. Anyways, the Romans are going to move up undercover, and they're going to start to engage with our front lines. However, this is where our mercenaries are going to be thrown in. This is something the Carthaginians would have done, is use their mercenaries to throw them into the fight. The Gauls, for instance, very good on the assault, and that's exactly how they're going to be used. So you can see here, the center African core is holding strong, whereas the wings are being hyper-aggressive. That is how you want to use these mercenaries. Over in the center here, what we decided to do was throw up some Libyan hoplites in the center, put them in shield hold, and all we wanted to do was hold back the Roman legions in the center, try and pin them in the center, and then, you know, crush on the wings with our heavy Gauls and other units. Now the Romans are going to try and, you know, punch through some of these gaps. That's why we're pulling in some of our infantry, but overall we didn't want to get surrounded. So I'm going to break this down for you. Our left wing has been engaged. You can see a lot of the Romans swarming in and amongst our guys. We got good charge bonuses, and the elephants here are going to come and support key positions where we think we may lose. But down through the center, we're holding up a lot of the Roman infantry just against a couple of these Libyan hoplites. They're absorbing pillar volleys, which is very important for us, and then we have strategic reserves to come and hit that. Over on the right side, you can see this attack is going very well. Some of the enemy cavalry did try and commit to this fight. However, our own cavalry is going to be swarming into here. But our heavy right wing is going to be a massive hook. They do get in on some of our units here. However, they're going to get overall caught and chased away by our cavalry. What that's going to mean is that now we're going to take over the entirety of the right wing with this massive push, reinforced with some of the Iberians. And now look at all of our guys streaming around the right side. So the Romans are going to be hard pressed to push past the center. The left is kind of evenly matched, so we're threatening to wrap around the right flank. So this could prove dangerous for the Romans. However, their skirmishers in the back are going to pivot, as you can start to see, to shoot our guys. Now, over in the center, we actually reinforced with some pikemen to help support this particular line. We didn't want our center to be crushed. That was a big flaw of several battles, and here the Romans were trying to push through, but we put some hoplites to try and cover that. Now, here comes the elephants. Unlike the disruption tactics that they would have been used in most battles as the frontline units, we decided to keep them until the Romans were pinned, so they couldn't have their pillar, and then we're going to charge in here, and you can see the pikes here able to force the enemy first cohort back along with the elephants, so we may be able to stabilize the center. Over here, the elephants did get to this position a little late. What that means is the Romans were not completely pinned, which will allow all of these velites to start to unload on them, so perhaps not the best timing for the elephants. And what that does mean is, with the elephants running amok and not particularly the best balance of forces on that side, we're going to be losing the left. So you can see our cavalry there getting somewhat pinned. Our infantry is going to be pinned as well, and our elephants are going to be destroyed. Over through the center, these elephants are getting a lot of kills. The right hand side, we're definitely crushing it, so we're going to just try and swing back and relieve pressure on the center. Some of our cavalry is going to be reinforcing on the right side, so a lot of coordination going in through the voice chat here that you can't necessarily see or hear about. Pikes are going to be definitely holding the Saki, the sacred band there, you can see in purple, and the elephants going to make for a lot of staying power down the center. Now the problem is, however, they do have a lot of these remaining skirmishers in the rear lines that are going to be hitting our guys. I'm not quite sure what happened to our Balearic commander. I think he may have lost track of them, but he's not quite suppressing those skirmishers, so that's going to be a problem for us. On this side, we're continuing to pour in a lot of cavalry into these fights. Definitely killing a lot of Romans, but I think we're being drawn into a delayed fight, and what that means is, it's just going to bide more time for the Romans to perhaps crunch through the center. Now, we are throwing some cavalry at that main skirmisher blob over there. You can see some of our units starting to break through the center as well. A lot of that wavering. So we've crashed through the right. We're going after the skirmisher blob, which is undefended in the center. In the rear, and then the center is starting to collapse. So things seem to be going okay. Now the main problem is going to be over here on the left, where the Romans seem to be doing well. The velites in close support are doing extremely well. Here they're going to be able to force back our cavalry, who are going to try and land some strikes on certain units, but as they do that, you're going to see volley after volley from not only the Velites, but also the infantry is going to shred our units. So quickly everything is going to be destroyed there. The Romans are soon going to rally over on this front. Cavalry, running them around here, trying to help knock out our units, ward off our cavalry. So we've been forced to vacate this side. Now, as they do this, they're going to be able to come and collapse in on our center line. Just as we were starting to win that, our guys are going to try and reposition. So it seems like we've kind of traded wings, and it's going to be who can make most use of that. Now, at first, it seemed like we were going to take the best advantage of our wing, but we got slowed down a bit, and here it seems like the Romans are now going to be taking the upper hand, and it really depends on who can relieve their force in the center, and it seems like at this point the Romans are going to be able to relieve their own forces in the center. Cavalry going to be the crucial part. We have none of our own doing this hammer and anvil, and that is going to start to pin our guys, slow our forces down in the center, allow for the first cohort to get back into the fight, and then all the Romans, from the left wing are going to be able to come back and contribute to the fight. Now my Libyans are holding definitely strong, and the elephants are still in here knocking these guys around, but the Velites from the left wing going to be coming back in. We have nothing really to answer from our skirmisher front, so our units are not doing super well. The elephants here with 225 kills, but finally going to be going down, so the Roman war machine on that front going well. And on the right side, it seems like we've been totally bogged down. From what we had before, we had a good lead, and then a lot of it was actually thrown to catch the skirmishers in the rear ranks of the enemy. And this is something that often have to happen in real battles, is that you would have cavalry win a fight and then chase after the enemy baggage train, and in doing so, it would be great for them, but then they wouldn't come back and save the day of the battle. They wouldn't come back and do the hammer and anvils. Then that's exactly what is happening in this battle. So this is what I love about sub-commanders, is kind of unintentionally you have scenarios like this that replicate history, and this was one of the main flaws that happened in this battle. For instance, is our cavalry did not come back and support our main lines, whereas the Romans did, and this is something that was definitely a contributing factor to several victories. It's what allowed, when Hannibal's commanders at Cannae brought their cavalry back, that's what sealed the deal in terms of killing off the Romans, sealing them off and destroying them. Same thing when you look at the Battle of Zama, when the tables were turned and the Romans won the cavalry fight. The cavalry was able, I believe it was under Massinissa, was able to rally, turn about, and then hit Hannibal in the back, thus, flipping the scenario of Cannae around back on the Carthaginians. So, like I said, this is just one of the great things about sub-commanders that I really like. The different commanders with different initiatives, forcing people to communicate, and the miscommunications and delays in communications are things that a good team has to learn to exploit, and I think the Romans definitely showed that they were capable of doing that. It could have been perhaps due to the fact that the way we sliced the units, the Carthaginians were very much, I was the hoplites. Hoplites are good at holding. Then another force was just the cavalry and elephants. They're good at, lightning strikes. But each on our own couldn't necessarily, fight its own battle. As opposed to, you take a look at the legions that the enemy had, and each legion can hold its own. And that again goes to show why the legion was so effective historically, because it is self-contained in and of itself. It is a fighting machine with supporting lines. If you look at the Polybian legions, they were in 3 lines always in each legion to support one another. With Velites skirmishers in the front, each legion had a contingent of cavalry. They also had artillery. So a lot of things to make it self-centered. Then when you move into the cohort, the whole idea behind the cohort is to take several maniples, group them together into units of 480, so that they could stand their own and be functional units. So here we see the Romans triumphing, perhaps because of the way the legions were just themselves composed. So again, this is just learning from Total War and kind of almost simulating history on the battlefield for why it proved to be so successful. So yeah, I hope you're enjoying these visuals, but I hope you do take a little bit away of this as a learning opportunity. Now, of course, the Romans didn't always triumph against the Carthaginians. We know, of course, during the course of the first, second, and sort of the third Punic War, the Romans got dealt pretty handed defeats, over time. So the legion themselves were not necessarily foolproof. They required a good commander. They required, more often than not, just good training and a lot of discipline. Roman discipline is what set it apart from other forces. It's something that will allow your infantry center to hold firm. It's what will allow your cavalry commanders to rein themselves in and come back to the fight. And I'm still kind of bitter that these guys jumped in their time machine and came back to fight during the Punic Wars. That first cohort there probably doing work with their lamellar armor, or not lamellar, lorca segmentata, sorry. But yeah, at this point the battle has kind of been slaughtered. You can see the Romans are now moving in these giant blobs, going around wrecking our guys. Even the Roman general going to be committed to this fight. And yeah, our cavalry is still kind of somewhat, frolicking around, chasing down routing units, but we can't take out the Roman blob that is staying together. So we're trying to pick off certain units, but with the enemy Velite is still alive. They may still have ammo, I'm not sure. But yeah, look at them. They're kind of staying as a blob and then finally sallying out and striking at our guys. So I think we're going to go out in a blaze of glory somewhat. Definitely a well-fought battle on all sides. But the Romans are going to seize the day here, and it looks like we're going to finally throw in the towel, commit our last unit into the rear of that force, and get a few extra kills. We do slaughter that unit, but in turn we're going to get killed. So yeah, that's going to be the end of the battle. Thank you to all those who participated in this fight. It was a 3v3. I know we didn't focus too much on each commander's role within the battle itself, but if you go ahead and rewind to the very beginning, you'll see kind of who commanded what. We can see what the results were. So myself right here getting a fair amount of kills, even as the holding force. So none of my guys necessarily getting too many kills. I think as the hoplites I was supposed to hold it, and then with my infantry there, you can see with the swordsmen doing pretty well themselves. My pikemen actually doing pretty well as well. But yeah, I think my force was not necessarily supposed to be the killing force. Fisher here getting a lot of kills, good work with the elephants. Some of the cavalry doing very well, 144, 171, mostly against skirmishers, but some of the cavalry just not doing too well, and I think the cavalry could have been better used. Despite him getting a lot of kills here, I think he could have gotten more in combination with hammer and anviling. Here, RSC Vindico doing okay. I think the Balearics super underperformed. They should have been suppressing the enemy archers and velites and keeping them off the backs of our elephants. I think he perhaps failed in that capacity. The Mercenary Noble Fighter is not doing super well there, so I think this player underperformed, and it shows in the stats. Anyways, in Indy Pride, like we said, the Romans all have their self-contained legions, so Indy himself doing very well, getting 1,400 kills to his name, so pretty good, and that's basically the same that DJP Soldier got, he himself being his own self-contained unit. And it's funny to see these forces here. Actually, the Principes there with 303 kills as opposed to the first cohort at 157. Or it was an Eagle cohort actually. Huh. And then Papa Smurf finally with the cavalry and skirmishers here. So at the end of the day, his force did not do too well either. It looks like on both sides of the battle, the cavalry and skirmishing force didn't really end up being the contributing factor, which kind of goes to show if it wasn't about cavalry and skirmishers, but mostly about the infantry fight, well, Romans were famous for their infantry, so perhaps they had an edge in this engagement after all. But anyways, it was fair funds, fair fight, so kudos to everyone who watched. I hope you guys enjoyed as viewers. See ya.